Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave, and we love to hear where you think we got it right, mostly where you think we've got it right, but also where you think we might have botched it, which you can do at unsilentpodcast.com. Rumble has a great comment section, or the various social media channels where America gets together to show its love for each other. I'm in a mood today, Brian, so I just had to mix it up a bit.
All right. There you go. I'm all for it. So I got a couple little things that are kind of just anecdotal. Some of the stuff I suspect might make the history books. Dave and I try to talk about things that, the people who live 70 years from now will not be studying about in their history books, whatever history books look like in 70 years, as far as like the format or whatever. They'll probably just be some kind of eyeglass you wear or some kind of Matrix plug-in where you just learn 16th century French poetry or something like that. And anyhow, Elon Musk posted a couple of things about LGBT mostly trans stuff, but this is LGBT is what he's referring to here. So I don't know the legitimacy. This is Statista, so this is not some kind of random guy in his basement chart I'm looking at. But so this is percentage of adults who are in the U.S. who identify as LGBT, right? So for the traditionalist generation, it's 1.7%. Baby boomers, it's 2.7%. Gen X is 3.3%. So all, pretty close there. Gen X is double the traditionalists, which is like Joe Biden's generation, if I remember correctly on that. But still, we're talking like a 1.5, it's double, but it's, still it's small for the aggregate. It's, 1.5% increase. Right. Still small numbers. Okay. Then we get to millennials, and it jumps from Gen X at 3.3. Millennials are 11.2.
Wow.
And then Gen Z jumps to 19.7%.
Wow.
Who identify as LGBT, right? So that was a thing that kind of caught my eye. It's like, okay, well, that's interesting. And then he made a comment that I really thought was pretty smart, and I think I agree with quite a bit, and I just never really could articulate it very well. But he said, my observation is that a major driver of white males becoming trans is the relentless propaganda portraying white men as the worst human beings. And I thought, you know what? When you're 13, 14, 17, and you're going through all those changes in puberty and you're taking these psychological hits left and right and these physical hits left and right, that for a lot of people, that's probably the point in your life where you have the lowest self-esteem.
Sure.
And if you have, I experienced, I don't know about you, but I experienced it as an individual, but my high school counselor was like pulling for me. It felt like, now I wouldn't say they were effectual in like helping me navigate what I was going through, but I got the sense they were pulling for me. They were hoping I figured it out. And I hoping I had a successful life and hoping I was happy. And also with that, aren't we lucky to be in the U.S.? Like, as bad as your life sucks when you're 14, going through all these changes, at least you're doing that in a first world country. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I think about, okay, what's it got to be like for a 15-year-old girl or a 16-year-old boy now?
Yeah.
Well, mostly the boys going through this where people aren't pulling for you. They're actually like, if you're not the right complexion, you're not the right race.
Sure.
They're not pulling for you. Now, I know plenty of people are listening and go, well, yeah, that's what it was like in Alabama in 1957 or Mississippi in 1943. And I would agree.
Absolutely.
And it sucked for them too, really bad, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't wish that on anybody, and including young white males today.
Sure. No, I think that's true. I think it's you're when you're that age, you finally know a thing or two, and you're paying attention to a thing or two other than the things you play with as toys and all this kind of stuff. And so you're just beginning to try and navigate the world. And then you have, and the problem with today, of course, is there's the messages are just all over the place. I mean, they're just
Right.
completely all over the place. There's no consistent messaging that society gives to anybody in that space, and so it's got to be doubly confusing today versus what it was in the past.
Yeah.
And of course, to the point of for instance, black people in the 30s or 40s or 50s, absolutely, it wasn't confusing, but it really sucked.
It really sucks. Yeah.
It's terrible.
But here's the thing. I think that one of the key things that is different, other than who the victim and the scapegoat and the villain
Sure.
and all those, like the roles have changed. Like a Rubik's cube, we just changed the colors and but the roles are still the same, right?
Right.
The difference is when I was growing up, there was a singular path.
Yeah.
Yep, it sucks right now, Brian, but we've all been through it and we all get through it, and you're going to come out of this a grown male and you're going to be fine.
Right. Right. Yeah.
That's not the case now.
Right.
Now there's an off ramp.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you're unhappy because you really wish you had a vagina instead of a penis.
You were born in the wrong body or something.
Maybe you should consider that. And again, I don't looking back, and I don't think I would have been prone to follow that logic, if you want to call it logic.
Sure.
But who knows? Given a desperate enough day or a week or month or situation, and I mean, there was, for all of us, I think there's particular years that stand out between junior high and high school.
Oh yeah,
that was not my favorite.
Right, exactly.
I mean, so like, given the right year or given the right semester or whatever, I might have said, you know what, maybe this is because I'm in the wrong body. Because now it's an option where it wasn't an option before.
Right.
And maybe I'm simplifying this too much. I don't know, but I do agree that when people tell you you're the villain and you have an off ramp of, well, okay, I can be a straight white male and be the villain, or I could be some kind of LGBT white male and be the hero.
Sure.
Well, is that trade-off is a physical changes, I'll say politely,
sure,
I would make, and the pain and suffering that would go along with that, even if it's just physical pain and suffering, and then not knowing the emotional pain and suffering, because we're not really allowed to talk about that part.
Right.
And for a 14, 15, 16-year-old who is not really capable, in my opinion, I'm not saying this to be harsh, just as a guy who went through it, of forward thinking beyond like 3 days.
Right.
Thinking about consequences of what's going to happen when you're 27, when you're 14, that's not very high on the priorities, I don't think, right?
Well, yeah, it's not even in the consideration, because you're just tempting, as I recall from those days, you just want whatever angst or pain or confusion, you just want it to stop. You just, it's so
let's say you're this 15-year-old, or I'm this 15-year-old boy, and I want this pain or angst to stop. And I'm having one of those years or months or semesters or whatever it is. It's just especially not good. And again, I think we all have them, right? And somebody says, well, have you considered that maybe you're in the wrong body?
Right.
And I say, no. And maybe I dismiss it the first time, but then I think about it like, well, I don't know, maybe I am. And so maybe I go back and talk to that person 2 weeks later, and it's my high school counselor. And he or she says, I know a person you can talk to. And that person welcomes me with open arms. They're like, Brian, we're glad, man, you're in the right place, and we're so proud of you. And like, boom, there's that emotional uptick. Right?
Yeah.
There's that emotional boost of, well, crap, that's what I've been looking for. And it feels to me like, again, not having gone through any of this stuff, once you get on that train, that emotional uplifting train, how do you get off?
Yeah.
When you're 14 and you can't think 10 years in advance, and you don't worry about consequences in the future, and life really, really sucked in here for this period of time, for a few months or whatever, it didn't suck.
Right. Yeah. Well, you get the dopamine hit of approval. I mean, because if anything, when you're an awkward teenager, you're hoping for approval. And I mean, your parents are, hopefully your parents and people around you when you're a kid's like, oh, it's so cute. And, here's a talking, all this kind of thing. But then you get to be a teenager, and teenagers, of course, now that they've got a little bit of mental capacity, not a lot, but they've got a little bit of mental capacity, are going to use that mental capacity oftentimes to cut down other people, to bully other people and all of that. And so, an escape from that. Well, and it occurs to me that the thing that's really kind of brought the societal awareness and discussion of trans issues to a head has been women's sports. right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of, and so it's like, well, why of all the things that could, affect this, why that? Well, so I don't want to be cruel to anybody, but usually the males that are identifying now as females in women's sports were mediocre athletes in boys sports, and now they're breaking records and winning awards and
Well, except for Leah Thomas, who ranked 435th or whatever the males. I mean, obviously you're overlooking her.
way up there. So it falls along that same theory, right? I mean, it falls along that same idea. It's like I could be this over here. I could be a mediocre athlete that gets no applause or anything like that, or I could
self-esteem that goes along with that.
Yeah, or I could be a leading person on the podium there. And I'm above everybody else because I've won. And I'll have to sacrifice a few things. I'll have to grow my hair long and wear different clothes and stuff. But that could very well, because I've marveled at that a little bit. I've marveled at the whole the evolution of the trans issue. That okay, well, so there's there's obviously people who genuinely experience gender dysphoria as a condition. It's a documented condition, but then
historically, according to this chart, 2.5% ish on average.
Yeah, a pretty small percentage. Yeah, a pretty small percentage. But then, so has that really? I figured, okay, well, people are going to look at this clinically and sort of figure this out. Well, no, it has everything to do with women's sports and girls' sports, and guys spiking volleyballs into girls' faces and breaking their arms and all this kind of stuff. So that sort of supports that theory, and I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and the reason I was thinking about this, like, once you get on that train, that emotional uplifting train, how could you get off?
Right.
I remember a day. So for me, one of those years was sixth grade, and I had moved to South Texas, very deep South Texas. I think it's like 100 miles north of the Mexican border.
Right.
And I was a new kid, and it was the first year of junior high or middle school. In that, how different schools, like some is seventh and eighth grade, some is sixth and seventh, like some it's 8 through 12 as high school. Like everybody has their own version of that. We moved to an area where sixth grade was middle school, and I'd come out of an elementary school, so I didn't. That was a change, right? And I lived in an area where I was, if you just looked at complexion, I was definitely in the minority. There was only a handful of kids that looked like me running around.
Yeah.
And all of them had money except for like me and 3 others. And so we weren't allowed at the rich kids table.
Yeah.
And we certainly weren't allowed at the kids tables who didn't look like us.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those like really, really low points. I would go to school like crying, like, and I was not a kid prone to crying.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have common crying fits, but I would literally go to school crying sometimes. And my first period teacher, again, this is 39 years ago, Dave.
Yeah.
I remember this like it was yesterday. My first period teacher, Mrs. Ramirez, she didn't like me. Now, as I'm an adult now, I'm now able to look back and go, well, maybe she liked you fine. Maybe you're just like, she didn't, she was indifferent to you, maybe, or whatever. And maybe she probably had no emotional attachment to me in one way or the other. I doubt she remembers who I am 39 years later. Like I remember who she was.
Right.
But my day started off in a classroom where I just thought the teacher just hated me because I didn't look right. Right.
Yeah.
And I was miserable for months and months and months. And then one day, all it took was having a substitute teacher who was also Hispanic, who was just nice to me.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, I had a pretty good day, like, whatever. And then the 3 days that we had a substitute teacher, and I was fine after that. Now, I wasn't in a blissful situation.
Sure.
But I came to believe I could make it. I'll get through this. I can endure this. It's just, whatever. Because it felt like more temporary. Like, hey, okay, she doesn't like me, fine. It's miserable when I go to my first period English class, but whatever. It's only 6 more months or 7 more months or whatever the school year is. And it was that moment with just that little change that all of a sudden I thought I could make it and I'd be fine. I got to think with something like this, getting on that emotional high train of, hey, maybe you're in the right place and this is what you've been looking for. That's got to be 100x what I experienced.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, and especially now, I think that we have so many different addictions to dopamine hits, essentially. So you take everything you just talked about and then apply it to modern day and look at, how is social media designed? Social media is designed as to be as addictive as, hard drugs, they say.
Sure.
So not only do you get the approval of the people, in the little circles for being courageous and everything at school, but now in the place that's designed to be as addictive as drugs, you're getting dopamine hit after dopamine hit after dopamine hit for your proclamation. And getting people all over potentially the area, the state, the world, saying go go go. So I think it takes a lot of that normal, if you will, that maybe it's not normal, maybe it's the common experience of looking for an out when you're in that spot. And now it gives you not just a small dopamine hit, but it gives you a huge dopamine hit from the drug dealer of Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, the whole thing.
You have this online community that you can, merge into that becomes your support system or whatever. I'm not a psychologist. I don't understand this stuff, but a group you belong to, all you gotta do is make it home from school, and like you have a group you instantly belong to,
right?
And all you gotta do is meet this one criteria, and you're in,
yep.
and they love
yep.
you, and they're so happy, and they're back to that. We're pulling for you.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Exactly. No,
So I don't know. Maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but it seems to me like there's something that is worthy of paying attention there that we're not allowed to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And especially, I think it's especially, with technology around us, not just social media, but all of the things that are around us today are the news cycle, the 24/7 news cycle, all of these different types of things feed into that and condition our brains to look for that dopamine. When we were kids, we didn't have a whole lot of places to get that dopamine hit. There's
a great stick would give me dopamine.
Oh, sure, exactly, 100%. I mean, it's flying off the swing and landing on your feet and not breaking your neck or something. And now you're feeling like Superman for the day or something like that. But now we're conditioning. And again, I'm not a neuropsychologist or neurologist or anything like that. But it just seems to me that and from everything I read, it seems to me that we've conditioned our minds to look for that wherever we can find it. So that would definitely feed into that.
Yeah. All right. So shifting gears a little bit, this will be in the history books, I'm sure, as they look back on this era. But the stock market's at an all-time high. But you and I know from our immersion in the small business world, like that's not what it's like on Main Street, as they say.
Yeah.
It's different. So I'm looking at a chart here. This is from something called Morning Consult. I've never heard of it before.
Oh yeah.
But okay, so it seems like it's a legit kind of a thing, though.
Yeah.
And it's showing consumer sentiment across and it divides them into 3 income levels: over 100,000, 50 to 100,000, and under 50,000. And this chart shows consumer sentiment is exactly in line with income levels. People at the lowest, below 50,000, have the least positive consumer sentiment.
Right.
The middle brackets, right, almost smack in the middle, probably I'd say about 40 percentile between the two.
Right.
And then above 100,000, it's like off to the races. And I think that as whatever happens in this fourth inning happens and whatever path we're going to go down, it does feel like there's going to be a reckoning there.
Yeah.
Where it just feels like the wealth gap has gotten so far for that small percent. And, historically, this is where revolutions happen. And I'm not saying we're going to have a new American revolution. I'm not suggesting that, but something is going to change. Either the top income earners will get such a grip on things that they're immune or isolated from any kind of pushback, or they won't. It's how it feels like to me, right?
You know what strikes me about that? What strikes me about that is the ones that I think if you objectively say of those 3 groups, who is more in touch with objective reality in those 3 groups? And the people that are most in touch with objective reality are on the lowest end of the income spectrum. Because if you look at the people on that highest end of the income spectrum, in that 100,000, 200,000, 1%, the whole thing, everything up from there, they're invested in NVIDIA, in Apple, in Microsoft, in Amazon. They're invested in these companies that are illogically valued. They're insanely valued. I mean, just from just as a business person, I look at that and it's okay. Nvidia. Yeah, if I hold on to Nvidia and they're a wonderful company. They're an amazing company. Their earnings are great. All that stuff is fantastic. So nothing against Nvidia. Jensen Huang's fantastic. All that. But if I wait 72 years, let's see, I'll be 130. I might make my money back. You cannot invest, but people are still, if they talk about September, maybe there's going to be a rate cut. Wait and see. If there's a rate cut in September, probably a bunch of money is going to pour into the Mag 7, the Magnificent Seven, as they call them, these companies that are $4 trillion. I mean, I can't even, quick, how many zeros are in 4 trillion? I have to,
I think is it 12?
I'd have, 12, well, see, that's it. I'd have to think about it. It's such an irrational number. It makes no sense. So the people that are in that sphere, in that spectrum, the smart, rich, asset holders, uber wealthy, or anybody over maybe $250,000, regular, they are the ones that are the least connected to reality, to financial reality. The ones that are in the blue collar workers, in that middle space, the folks in that lower income bracket, they are more connected to things like gas prices and the cost of living and inflation, isn't going to hit Elon Musk. It's going to hit the people that live paycheck to paycheck. So it's fascinating to me that the least among us, if you want to call it that, financially speaking, are the ones that are the best bellwether connections to reality in this time, because it hasn't always been that way. It used to be the people that looked at the stock market, for instance, would look at it and say, okay, well, can I get dividends from this stock? Is there good appreciation based on the forward-looking guidance, as they say? All of these different types of things. Are the interest rates going to go down, and so therefore affordability of houses is going to be better? They would look at those things, but those are not what gets looked at now. It's all momentum and volume, and
speculation.
Speculation. It's all just gambling.
As you were describing that, something occurred to me. The flip side of this also, which is those who are the highest income, I would agree, are the most removed from reality in many ways of what laws do. But our system now, which I'm not saying our system is like how the framers designed it. I'm talking about more the societal system, not the governmental system.
Sure.
The system now is you have a wealthy family, you come from a wealthy family, you get sent to a prestigious school to shape you to be that policymaker next generation.
Right.
So there's this compounding benefit of ever more removed people in ever increasingly powerful and what's the word I'm looking for? Like situations that would allow you, or even make it likely that you would become a legislator, a policymaker, a lawmaker, or whatever, or a lobbyist, or whatever that helps shape these things.
Right.
But every generation, those people who are put in those situations where that's likely to be the outcome are further removed from the reality of the laws they're making.
Right. And that also then ultimately ends up explaining populism. It ends up explaining Trump. And I was listening to it was an economist, the economist out of England. One of their podcasts this morning talked about the rise of the right across Europe. Well, I think it was Daily Wire, actually, completely opposite organizations. But anyway, I triangulate my listening, and they're talking about the rise of the right in Europe, and how and it's the populist right. It's not the George Will conservative right that I would spend most of my life kind of politically being affiliated with. And all of that is the people that are pushing back against that are the same people that have thought that they are the just and rightful heirs of the positions of leadership in society. And so you do have, on one hand, again, you've got the poor people, the middle class people, the folks that are your average working Joe, as they call it, Joe Sixpack, as they like to derisively call. Being in touch with things, and also financially, and also really pushing where the reins of power are being held. And so you do have this not just financially, but in every aspect of society, all the things you're talking about, they have in every aspect of society, we have got a gulf that is widening and widening and widening. I mean, so if you look at Europe as an example of this, I find it fascinating that, like in Germany, they've made the AfD, which is the populist right wing party in Germany, that basically you labeled them as an extremist group, but they're getting they're the ones that are growing the most. If you look at France and look at Marine Le Pen, and we've talked about her before, they basically shut her out and said, no, you're legally. So there, all of these things, and this is where it seems to me. And of course, it's happening all across Europe. I mean, the people in America and Europe, the elites love to hate Viktor Orban, in Hungary. Yeah. So, you go whatever country you want to go to, you're going to find the same exact thing. So this is where it has that potential in every aspect of society and societal, and this is also with the previous issue we were talking about, the trans issue. Your average person working in a Ford factory, producing F-150 trucks is like, girls and boys locker rooms. Yeah. But the Harvard professor is like, well, let's talk about intersex, so yeah. Every place there's this disconnect happening, and it does have the potential of spilling over into something much more concerning, much more potentially dangerous.
That's a great segue to the last thing I have for today, which is I can't play the video because she drops the F-bomb like 13 times in about a minute 10.
It's a family-friendly show here.
Yeah. I don't know. Looking at her, I'm guessing she's probably 35-ish. I don't know. I don't know her ethnicity. It doesn't really matter. But she lost her job after 10 years. She had a job for 10 years and lost it. Presumably she was laid off. Maybe she was fired. I don't know. It just says she lost her job. The way she describes it would lead me to believe that she was laid off, but I don't know.
Yeah.
She has a family, and so she needs health insurance.
Yeah.
So they give her the whole Cobra speech and like, okay, here's how it works and whatever. But that, it's like $1,400 a month or whatever. I'm guessing. Yeah. I don't know what her Cobra is, but so she goes to the state, whatever state she's in, and says, I need health insurance. And they say, you're denied. They denied her. And they said, well, go to the government, the federal exchange thing. And the federal exchange thing says, no, you have to go to the state. So she's in this governmental loop where she can't get insurance, right? And she does this video where she's like, kind of like that. I didn't really worry about it because it didn't affect me. There's a saying from the Second World War where I didn't worry about the Union guys because I'm not in a union.
Right,
I didn't worry about the Jews because I'm not a Jew. Like it's that kind of thing. Like she's like, I never really worried about this before. But now, all of a sudden, I remember how easy it was for all these illegal immigrants to come here and get health insurance on day one and get a $5,000 EBT debit card and get a cell phone and get your EBT card. And she's losing her mind. Like she's like, again, I won't play the video here because she's like, she's livid. She's beyond pissed.
Sure.
That how could this be? And I think that all these things put together, just I would liken it to a powder keg, but I know I'm probably more likely to be exaggerating that than maybe what reality is, or maybe I'm underplaying it. I don't know. But all these components, I think that the middle and lower class people are one day going to wake up and say, this is nonsense. You're focused on who's in what sports. You're focused on who can be in the bathroom.
Yeah.
California had that thing where kids now have to sign a thing that says they need a special mental health exemption to not want to be, for girls not to want to be in a bathroom with boys.
Right.
Like they have to sign a thing that says they're the problem. The girl has to say she's the problem. She needs the mental health exemption because she has a mental health issue. I think all these things, whether it's in 3 years or 13 years or I don't know.
Yeah.
At some point, this is going to come to a head. I just don't see how it can.
Well, it sort of seems like in a lot of ways it is right now. I mean, so in politically as well. So if you look at to wrap another piece into this, the whole law and order piece. So we've had Trump basically take over Washington D.C. As far as law and order is concerned, and murders have gone down like 84%, carjackings down. I mean the numbers
87% was the number I heard for carjackings.
Yeah, it's just over the top, even to the point where Muriel Bowser, the mayor of DC, says, "Well, yeah, that's actually. I mean, at some point you can't deny it. You can't just
deny it. Yeah,
you can't deny that you may hate Trump, but what he's doing's working, and so But then you've got the mayor of Chicago, Brandon something or other, and is it Pritzker who's the governor out?
Is it Brandon Johnson and JB
Brandon,
Pritzker? I think.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. Out there, and they're like, no, we have to fight. We have to fight. Who are we going to fight? We got to fight the criminals, the gangs. There's like 58 shootings over the weekend in Chicago, and like 8 deaths or something like that, or some. And who we got to fight? Well, we got to fight Trump. Well, maybe we should fight like the people that are killing our kids. No, really,
I watched that. I saw that clip, and I was sitting next to my wife on the couch, and I paused it and I said, "Okay, here's 2 people who are constantly decrying how we need to get rid. We need to ban all guns."
Right.
Okay, except for their security detail.
Except for their security detail. Yeah. Right.
Those. Right.
No. We gotta have those.
The pig. We're all animals equals, but some animals are more equal than others.
Right? Yes, exactly.
But he's making this speech about, are you prepared to fight for the homeland that slaves built? Are you prepared to fight for the homeland that union labor built? And all this stuff. And I paused the video and I said, what are you supposed to fight with? What is your tool of choice if you're going to take on the federal government? As Joe Biden said, we have F-35s and you don't.
Right, exactly.
What does this even mean?
Yeah.
It's just rhetoric, right? It's just all BS.
It's totally rhetoric.
Anti-Trump BS. And eventually people like this lady in this video I can't play, and those people who are more in tune to what reality, I think some cohort will be formed where there will be something, some showdown. And again, I don't mean trenches and muskets and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
but
hopefully not. But hopefully not. But on the flip side of that, this is not just a U.S. thing, as we've been talking about in Britain. What's going on in Britain right now? They've got St. George's Cross all over the place. They're painting it on crosswalks and on roads, and they're hoisting the Union Jack all over the place. And I mean, there's all of this, and the Brits are nicer people. Let's be real about this. The Brits are nicer people than we are. Okay,
I would say they're more polite. I wouldn't say they're nicer.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, we're a good people because we help a lot more people, and we give a lot.
We're certainly more generous about how we structure our charity versus their government takes care of things is different. So it's not a level playing field, but I would certainly say they're more polite.
They're calmer than we are. I remember, in one of my visits to London, I asked, and he was actually an immigrant to London who actually spoke perfect Queen's English. And I asked him, so what do you think of Americans? I was sitting in he was driving our cab, and I think he wanted to be careful because he wanted a good tip.
He wanted a good tip?
He said, well, you're a very loud lot. Well, yes, we are. We're very, but it's gotten the divide between the elites and like JB Pritzker and Brandon Johnson and all these people have gotten so great, and there's such a disconnect from reality. The whole girl with the axe thing we talked about last week. There's such a angst around that even the polite, more calm Brits. I mean, I could understand this in France. I mean, your baguettes, a day old, and they're going to riot in Paris. So let's just count things go there. But not typically in Britain and throughout in the Scandinavian countries. I mean, they're all chill, but look what's happening there with like the farmers' revolt and all that. So I do think it seems to me, and I can't predict the future. Anybody can predict the future who says they can predict the future is completely wrong. But it seems to me that there's this global thing happening, not just here between the elites and everybody else, and it seems closer, frankly, to me. And the question is always gradual change or tipping point change. And it seems to me, and the fourth turnings always seem to have tipping point changes that take place. You think it's going to be a gradual change, but it turns out to be boom. All of a sudden, here this is going on, and
it's like going into bankruptcy. It's gradual, and boom, all of a sudden.
Until it's all of a sudden.
It feels like how these things kind of go. Yeah. There was a moment in the French Revolution. I don't know what it is because I'm not up to speed on French history. There was, the Boston Tea Party. I mean, there was the
Right.
shot at Fort Sumter. I mean, there's these moments that are just the ignition for to light the slowly smoldering fire that's hidden underneath the brush or whatever metaphor you want to use. All right, Dave. So you've been sitting on a couple things for a couple weeks, so I'm going to turn it over to you, and you lay it out for us. What's on your mind?
Well, so, I thought one of the things that'd be interesting to talk about periodically is what books we're reading. What's on your mind? What books are you reading? So my current bevy of books that I'm reading.
You're asking the audience, right? You're not asking me.
Well, I was kind of hoping you might have a book or two. I don't know, Brian. Well,
I read a book over the weekend. Actually, over the weekend I read a book, but it was about business. It was not anything about history.
Okay, well, when I get done with mine, we'll just wrap the episode and call it good.
Yeah.
So, some books that I can recommend, some books that I'm reading. So there's one fellow that I find incredibly interesting. His name is Dr. Ian McGilchrist. He is a Scottish fellow, so he's wonderful to listen to anyway. And he seems like some kind of cross between a hobbit and a Scottish professor. In fact, I think he lives in the far reaches of the northern Scotland or something like that. So I mean,
One of those dome-shaped houses underground. Is it?
I kind of doubt. I envision. I don't know where he lives. I mean, he lives in that area, but I kind of envision him living in a thatched hut or something, sitting outside smoking a corn cob. I don't know. Well, yeah, I should look that up and see. But so he's written several books, and I've heard him interviewed a bunch of times. Now his books are challenging to read because they're tomes. So one of the books, and he's just by way of background.
Give me, Dave, again. What's a tome? I'm sorry.
A tome is a monstrously large book. It's not.
Okay, third grade education level is how you're going to connect with me, bud.
Okay, so it's not Cliff's Notes. It's not
Okay, gotcha.
see Brian run Brian.
Yeah.
Run. So it's not that.
It's more War and Peace, less Green Eggs and Ham.
Yes, exactly right. So he is a neurologist. He's a psychologist, psychologist, and he went to Cambridge. He's got this incredible pedigree. Very soft-spoken fellow. Philosophy. I mean, he's a philosopher. So he's got this interesting combination of things. And his seminal works have been on the hemispheres of the brain. So, most people, I'm going to go read a book. Maybe I'll read The Godfather. No, I'll read a book on the hemispheres of the brain. But his conception, and this goes along with the ideas of the fourth turning, et cetera, are that, and his work, his research, he's done lots and lots of research. He's probably in his 70s now, late 60s, probably 70s, I think, has been on how the different hemispheres of our brain perceive and control the world. And so the left hemisphere of the brain is what he calls the emissary, and the right hemisphere is what he calls the master. And the right hemisphere of the brain, and the reason I say his book is a tome, again, a very big book for those of us in Arizona, the right hemisphere of the brain, he says, should be the thing that controls us, because it's got a broad view, it's got a strategic view, it's where our perceptions are, the way that we kind of look at the world, whereas the left hemisphere of the brain is very task oriented, is very narrowly focused. And he says that in our societies now, we have become so left hemisphere focused that we can't see the big picture. We can't understand the big picture. We can't merge science and spirituality, and he's a spiritual man. He's a Christian by heritage, but he's open to other ideas, etc.
Yes.
And listening to him is just a joy because of the things that he brings out and that I can identify with. When you look at our societies today, we're so how can you take some of these topics that you and I discuss, and how can people be so focused on details that they can't see this big picture? The thing that you and I've talked about in a number of our episodes is, don't they see how dumb this is in the big picture? Well, no, because they're so focused on narrow details. I've had these discussions with folks that I won't mention by name here because I don't have the permission to, but I've had these discussions, for instance, with a friend of mine who's an MIT biologist, scientist, very, very smart man. And, we start talking about like women's sports, and he brings up, well, there's, intersex people, and there's, so therefore there's really no such thing as male and female. Like, dude, you're really kind of nuts for a brilliant MIT scientist. And Dr. McGilchrist talks about how, and he's actually relatively pessimistic about the outcome of all this, because he says if the brain, the master side of the brain, the right hemisphere of the brain, if that is not in control, we're going to make all sorts of bad decisions based on narrow interpretations, narrow understanding. So he's got,
okay.
Yeah, so that's a fascinating one.
Wait, and you if you don't know this, is fine. I can Google it real quick, but um in the old school thinking, left brain, right brain, one side's emotional, one side's more task.
Yes.
Does this align with what he's saying?
To an extent, although he pushes back against that as too simple a concept. So his and the name of his big book is The Master and His Emissary.
The big tome, is that what it's called?
Yes.
Like the big tome,
the
like big toe?
Yes, which means a large big book as opposed to a small big book. Yes,
Gotcha.
So differentiate there. So yeah, but it kind of takes that concept and it takes it up several notches in terms of what it, and he takes it into the place of philosophy and he applies it to society. And he says, and again, paraphrasing, that there's a real danger to the functioning of society when we are so hyper specialized that we can't see the forest for the trees. The big picture is kind of absent. We can't understand philosophy. So to me, he's also very fascinating because he does mix the sciences, neurology, with philosophy. I think one of his degrees is in literature. So how do you take, it's something I wouldn't expect. I wouldn't expect like a neurologist and a literature, PhD from Cambridge. I don't know if he has a PhD in literature, but he's got a degree, to be the same person at that same level of interest. So that one is fascinating to me. And another one,
it's funny. It's funny. So that one, what you're talking, if I'm interpreting this correctly, is we have grown to a point where we're so hyper focused on details, we're missing the big picture. Is that kind of the synopsis?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, it wasn't a book. I was watching a video about a week and a half ago,
right,
where they were talking about AI and how that's going to affect consulting type businesses. Now, obviously, I have a vested interest in learning about that, and the prevailing thought now is for people who do business consulting, like I do, you need to be a specialist.
Yeah,
and that has gotten more and more emphasized over the last decade. Like you can't be the guy known for everything. You got to pick one thing and be known as solving that one problem, right? And in your world, you know this.
Oh, absolutely. That's what we do. Yeah.
And so what he was saying was, yes, that's where we're at now, but that's not going to work in 5 years because AI is going to take care of all the detailed stuff, and you better be more of a generalist or you're not going to make it. And while AI is the thing now, it also makes sense in this kind of societal, looking through a societal lens, that we have more narrow in our focus. Again, going back to our previous conversation about the haves and have-nots, we're pretty selective on who we're aiming to please in laws and how we structure things.
Totally.
And at some point, that's going to break. So it makes perfect sense in kind of a societal thing that, through certain eras, you're going to look at details, but then all of a sudden the details, you're going to make enough catastrophic compounding errors where you learn a really hard lesson.
Right. And because if you don't consider, as a society, if you don't consider the big picture, then you're liable to make mistakes that could be, existentially threatening. And that is where he has where Dr. McGilchrist has some very big concerns. So that one I find to be very fascinating. And I would throw in on the AI piece you're mentioning, I think that is absolutely true, because I do believe that with AI, I do a lot of work with AI stuff, that the thing that will come out with human beings and that will differentiate human beings in this next kind of age is not our ability to master a specialty, but our ability to relate to one another relationally and to understand kind of where human beings fit in this whole equation. So I think that's a big part of that. The other one that I happen to be reading
Yeah.
at this time, I'm actually going to probably finish it tonight, is a book by a neurosurgeon. So he's not a neurologist. So Dr. McGilchrist, I believe, is a neurologist. This guy, Michael Egnor, is a neurosurgeon, and he wrote a book called The Immortal Mind. And some of the things he talks about in the book were revelations to me. They were new to me. So basically, the premise, and what he demonstrates through discussions of, he's done apparently like 7,000 different brain surgeries. He was a pediatric neurosurgeon for a number of years. He's retired now, and he mostly speaks, and he's written his book and such. But one of the things, his premise, and so there's some new terms to me. There's in neuroscience and in neuropsychology and all this stuff. There's this idea of, or the question of, where is the mind? Where is the human mind? And so the materialist says that the human mind is just the brain. That's all it is. And
Right.
and so there's nothing more. Whereas the people that are the dualists say that no, there is no center of the mind is not actually centered in the brain. It's not actually a physical thing. It's a thing that the mind communicates through the brain. But he uses examples such as people that are born without one hemisphere of their brain, or people, he ultimately gets down to people who have lived relatively normal lives without either the right or the left hemisphere. They have just fluid in their brain, and they've got the cerebral cortex at the bottom, but they still live relatively normal lives. And other people that have, if the functions that are centered in the left or the right part of the brain, still being able to perform many of the functions that a normal human being would, even though they're missing half or three-quarters of their brain. So that to me is fascinating. He also then wraps into this, and I've always had kind of a notion, but not a real conception of these things very specifically, like he brings up. He also brings in near-death experience research. So, I've, for the most part in my life, now I'm a person of faith. I'm a Christian. I'm a believer. I believe there is a soul and all of that. But I've always kind of discounted near-death experiences as things that are essentially, hallucinations of the brain when you're on the operating table, and maybe you hear some things, and that's how you know things happening. But he brings in a number of cases, for instance, where people have had their brain, in order to do a brain operation, their brain is completely turned off, their heart is turned off, they're frozen, all the blood is drained from the brain. There is zero via an ECG and an electroencephalogram that measures brain activity. There's zero brain activity. And yet, during those surgeries, people have observed and heard and seen things, even though their eyes are covered. They've seen things that they cannot be explained by, the brain actually accidentally picked up a few things. And so the conception of the dualists in this case is that, yes, the mind is a thing, but it communicates, it works through the brain, but it's separate from the brain. It's part of our spiritual self, if you want to call it that. And he offers a ton of excellent evidence to support that from a neurosurgeon's perspective. People that have reported things that there is physically no possibility of them knowing after, for instance, a brain surgery or a near-death experience. So I find that to be rather fascinating as well. I just happen on these two books and these two people at the same time, and have been fascinated by it. So the book that I've been reading is, to kind of recap where we're at, it's called The Immortal Mind by Dr. Michael Egnor. He's a neurosurgeon, but over 7,000 surgeries. And so I was recapping a little bit about the notion of the dualists in neuroscience who believe, and they're in the minority of people who believe that the evidence shows that the mind and the brain, while connected, are not the same thing. things. And
Right.
and so therefore the previous thing we were just talking about, where people have big chunks of their brain missing, can still perform functions that we think would be centered in those places, but somehow the mind makes up that. And also then the next level that I was talking about when we kind of stopped was the near-death experiences, and people having recollections of things that cannot be explained away by, oh, they heard something when they were under anesthesia.
Right.
Somebody, for instance, with a brain that has been completely drained of blood. There's a very well documented case of a lady who's had an inoperable aneurysm on her brain, and there was no way to remove it without stopping her heart, draining all the blood from her brain, freezing her essentially, or getting her down to about 60 degrees where she's where there's literally nothing happening, measuring to see if there's any electrical activity in the brain, and there's none. And she's still, and her face is covered because only the portion of the brain they're operating on is open.
Yep.
And she still comes back after this near-death experience and reports on things that it's physically impossible for her to know. Now, the people that are the materialists who believe that there's the brain and the mind are synonymous will say, oh, well, there was just some leakage of information into there. Sure. They kind of explain these things away. But when there are so many cases, so many instances of people that have had those experiences that you cannot explain away. If a brain has no fluid in it, if it has no blood in it, if there's no electrical activity, and yet there is a visual record that somebody has that's faithfully reported literally just after this, then that's really, really evidentially hard to just dismiss. Some of the things about near-death experiences I think are fascinating are those types of things that show that there is a difference between the mind and the brain.
Well, I have my science acumen ended around between 7th and 9th grade, so I'll just start off with that. I don't understand most of the stuff, but I do have opinions.
Sure, of course.
and that is that, again, I kind of default to our understanding of how the universe works. Yeah. I think we have a solid understanding, like we know this and are correct. It's maybe 1%.
Right, exactly.
So I think that we, as a species, as in our scientific unities and scientific leaders and things like that, I think they can do a great job explaining how a heart valve works, like it pumps blood and mechanical things like that. I think as soon as you make the leap to consciousness, spirit, the spirit, mind, soul, whatever you want to call all that that bucket O things,
right?
They're spitballing just like the rest of us.
Totally.
They're spitballing through a different lens than somebody who grew up in the Catholic Church, for example, who's got that leading kind of overarching theme that they're the parameters and the paradigm they're working within.
Right.
But they're still spitballing, in my opinion. So
absolutely, this
notion that anybody can have any degree of certainty about how the mind and the brain are interwoven, I immediately, like, the more certain you are about that, the less I believe you, quite frankly.
Absolutely. Exactly.
And the mind and soul, are they different? Are they the same? And part of my paradigm I'm looking through with this stuff is, I'm not a subscriber to a lot of like the self-help stuff, like, just telling yourself you can, and I think there's some merit to some of that stuff.
Sure.
That said, though, going back to who's the guy that was in the 60s? He was the first one that used to do a radio show talking about like self-help stuff. Oh geez, James something. Anyhow, and then so you got him, and then you got Jim Rohn and those kind of guys that kind of were this self-help stuff.
Yeah,
they all have in the book How to Think and Grow Rich.
Oh, sure. Napoleon Hill. Yeah.
Yeah, Napoleon Hill. Going back, a century.
Yeah.
One of the things that was in 1929 or whatever year that book was written.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a business book, kind of a self-help book, whatever.
Yeah.
One of the underlying themes of that book is your conscious brain forcing your subconscious mind to believe things, which then compels your body to act in ways that you may or may not be in tune with.
Right, exactly.
And so even back in 1929 or 24 or 33 or whatever that book was written, there was an understanding that the mind and the brain are different. The
Yeah.
brain is mechanical, the mind is more, I would call it spiritual. You can call
Yeah.
it whatever you want.
Sure.
Consciousness,
Yeah.
you know. And we're like, I think Neil deGrasse Tyson is one of the smartest people to come along in a generation.
Sure. Yeah.
He loses me on some things though, like when he starts talking about why boys should be in girls' bathrooms. First of all, like he loses me there.
Yeah.
But the certainty in which he speaks about, we know how the brain works, and we know. And I always think like, well, okay, what is consciousness then?
Right.
What's it made of?
Right.
What are the components of it? What is it? If you're telling me it's just a biological circuit board, I don't quite buy that. And again, I don't have the scientific background to make a different case, but it just feels off to me.
Yeah.
So this idea that the brain and the mind and the spirit and the consciousness and the soul, whatever you box those things up as, and however you think about those things, that they're all one, that seems absolutely ludicrous to me. I also believe that we know about as much of the afterlife and those kinds of notions as fish in a pond understand about how you and I are having a Zoom call.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's part of one of the things that I take away from this book, and it's a fascinating book. One of the things I take away from it is there are in these two camps. One of the camps is got 100% certainty, and that's the materialist camp. And one of these camps is like, wow, like, some of these near-death experiences are experiences of people of one religion having near-death experiences that their religion does not teach. That's opposite of what their religion teaches. So it's like, you wouldn't expect a brain to come up with that kind of thing. So the other camp is like, no, there's more to this than meets the eye, and there's more to this than materialism can explain. And what you just said about consciousness, one of the reasons I'm also interested in this right now is because all of the discussion about artificial intelligence. Oh, we're going to create artificial creatures that are as smart as we are, that are conscious, that are living conscious creatures like we are. Well, the reality is that there is no, like you said, we don't know what consciousness is. We cannot. We know that we've got consciousness. The Darwinian idea of consciousness is helpful for survival. Yes, okay, we can see the development potentially of consciousness, but we can't see the arrival of consciousness. How did consciousness arrive in the first place? There's a lot of these things we can't see how it started. There's no non-conscious to conscious, mechanism. We just don't know. And so I think that's the age. One of the things that, going back to the first book I talked about, and we'll need to wrap this up, I know, one of the things that we go back to the first book that I was talking about, Dr. McGilchrist, talking about how the mind itself, the kind of the right brain side, the master part of the mind, as opposed to the technical mind, which is the left brain, the emissary, is potentially coming more into ascendance, so we can consider questions beyond our ability to technically dissect like the materialist would want us to. And so that to me is very encouraging, because we've done insanely cool technical things. The Enlightenment era, I'll leave this as my last thought here. Maybe the Enlightenment era, from John Locke and all of the great Enlightenment philosophers, has led us to technical heights that our ancestors could never imagine. But I think the Enlightenment era is basically coming to an end. Not that we're going to abandon our technology and our progress or science or anything like that, but the ascendancy of the Enlightenment over, for instance, the more spiritual components of humanity, I think that balance will potentially come back. I'm a little bit more optimistic of that than Dr. McGilchrist is.
Yeah. But by the way, Earl Nightingale was the guy I was trying to think
Earl Nightingale, of course.
So I would be a horrible Jeopardy contestant. I know the answer as long as there's no pressure. There's pressure, I can't think of it. But like Earl Nightingale, and then like Jim Rohn, and then the series of guys through the 80s, and then Tony Robbins, of course, and whatever.
Oh yeah.
But again, going back to the 20s, this separation of mind and brain, the conscious thinking and the subconscious thinking, the math I've heard ranges. It's like, kind of the math on how much of communication is verbal versus nonverbal. There's, some people say it's 60%, some say it's 93%, whatever. how much of your thinking that happens is conscious versus subconscious is similar.
Right.
Some people peg it at like 7%. Some people say it's more like 20, but it's the minority.
Yeah.
So what is the subconscious mind? That's not a brain function. The brain tells the heart to pump. The brain, connects, feel the things, nerves and things like that.
Yeah, synapses.
But it's not the subconscious mind. That feels to me like a different realm. And again, I couldn't explain it. But the more we try to simplify that, the more I think, kind of going back to your point of the other book, which is the more narrow our focus, the more we miss the big picture. Exactly. I think this is a great example of that, where we're trying to squeeze this big monumental topic, the mind, the conscious, the subconscious, the soul, the spirit, whatever, into a tiny little box that we can understand.
Right.
And I think we're just immediately on the wrong foot when we're heading down the wrong path when we do that. I think we'd be much better off to open ourselves up to realities that are true and correct, that we just are not willing to look like, just like Copernicus had to.
Absolutely. Well,
I don't see it as being much different, honestly.
And even Napoleon Hill, in the original work of Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill talks about connecting to infinite intelligence. Yeah. So you remember that? I mean, I remember that. And like in my tradition, okay, that's God. Simple enough. That's God. So it seems to me, connecting back to our premise of our entire podcast of the fourth turning, that this next turning, so we'll go through the physical existential crisis, but that's always followed by an awakening. So I'm looking forward to the next awakening. Because I do believe
you think you are.
Well, I mean, I'm looking. Yeah, I'm looking at the next. I'm a glass half full. You know that.
Yeah, I got you.
I'm a glass half full kind of guy. 3/4 full, even if it's mostly empty. So it's very possible, with all of the things that we've learned, and we've learned the limitations of our left brain world, that we will have more openness potentially after the crisis to some new things that we didn't consider before, or we didn't consider it was the realm of philosophy and religion before, and not just the realm of scientists, because science has reached its limit.
There's a saying that you'll know better than me, that pride cometh before the fall.
Pride cometh before the fall. Exactly. Okay. Right. Yeah.
I think that part of what we're going through at this fourth turning, and how this is relevant to future generations, is we have convinced ourselves, because of our technological advancements, because of our more quote unquote sophisticated way of life, that we are superior to previous generations of ourselves, going back hundreds or thousands of years. You know, and I'm leaning more towards the thousands than hundreds in this case. And I think that what we are likely to experience is irrefutable proof that that's incorrect. And when that happens, it's going to be brutal and ugly, like it always is.
Absolutely.
And of course, on the other side of that, we're going to default back to more spiritual enlightenment. I don't know, enlightenment's not the right word, but spiritual, less techie. I agree with you. The connection thing is going to be all important in the post AI world. But getting back to that, what makes us human, not which gadgets make us better. Exactly. I think it's kind of the direction we're going to be going. What do I know?
And I hope that's the case. That would be the best outcome of all this. Now, I do think if we look at the various turnings, at the various cycles, the secular cycles that have happened, there's always been some level of advancement that happens from one to the next. And so my hope is that the level of advancement that we get, I mean, is not just scientific, but is scientific and philosophical and religious all at the same time. So there isn't this tension between, for instance, the Enlightenment and the Reformation.
I think it's a more balanced world. I think that either extreme is not good. I think more I don't want to go back to pre-radio days. Looking for that.
Yeah. I'm not a nativist. I don't want to go back to that. I totally agree.
No, I don't want to. I'm not that much of a minimalist. I'm kind of a minimalist, but not that much. So
exactly.
Well, hey, as Dave said in the beginning, if you think there's something we talked about that we especially got right or wrong, we'd love to hear your input on that. We're trying to explain to future generations what this moment in time is like, as they no doubt look back and wonder, what the hell is wrong with those folks? You can do that by going to unsilentpodcast.com, or Rumble has a great comment section. Until next week, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.